then we are moving over to more content about the recoveriX system, about patient outcomes. Just give me a second to switch the screen. So I share computer sound again. Please let me know afterwards if you can hear it. And I gave you some examples of patients that were treated with recoveriX for upper limbs before. And here's also a very nice result of a musician who had a stroke that affected his right hand. And afterwards he gave us a concert at g.tec. Let me know if you can hear the music.
Ah, das wäre zum Beispiel, das ist wieder ein großes Problem. So. Sollte so.
Sounds pretty nice, actually, much better than what I could do, but of course, it could also be better. I mentioned it already before that recoveriX has also the side effect that pain and chronic pain is reduced. And we have already a couple of recoveriX systems in Finland. And they had also a very nice scientific case report that was published some time ago. And they had a young male patient who had extremely lower extremity pain. So 8 points out of 10 after his spinal cord surgery. And they used medication and all other treatments, but everything didn't help. And then they tested recoveriX. So they did 3 recoveriX treatments per week for 12 weeks long. And afterwards, the pain declined to 1 point out of 10. So this is also published in this paper by Koki Hanu. And this is something that's super interesting because in this case, the surgery was in the spinal cord and it was not a stroke. And Mayo is also one of our distribution partners in Finland. And they treated also a young lady here with recoveriX, and her motor abilities were also coming back very, very quickly. So we see also these improvements with many of our recoveriX centers, which are around the world and not only at g.tec. And then we are also working together with Dr. Kamada from Ashikawa Medical Hospital in Japan. And here's an example of a male patient who was 18 years old. He had a stroke and then he came to the medical hospital in Ashikawa and they recorded a video before recoveriX. And here you can see how the finger movement is actually done. So it's a little bit slow, but it's a very good sign that the patient can actually move all the 5 fingers. And then they did 1 recoveriX training. And the patient slept 1 night long. And on the next day, they did another video recording that you can see here. And you can just see how much different the hand movement is actually 1 day later. So this is the acute state. So there's a lot of opportunity in the acute state to produce neuroplasticity. But of course, there's also spontaneous recovery. So to show that recoveriX has a positive effect, you need much more patience than in the chronic state, because of the spontaneous recovery and these studies that we are doing at the moment. To summarize the results that we had with chronic patients, so we did a nice paper and we just looked at all the classification accuracies that patients achieved. And we can say if patients achieve more than 80% classification accuracy, then they improve more in Fugl-Meyer. This is a very general statement, But if we look at the table, then we have severely, moderately, and mildly impaired patients. So this is defined by the upper extremity Vogelmeier. I mentioned it before, the maximum is 66 points. And here we can see that people who had on average 46.5 points upper extremity Vogelmeier increased on average by 6.5 points if the classification accuracy was higher than 80%, and only 4.5 points it was lower. This means if you're really participating in the training, then the increase, the improvement is bigger. But of course, here we have also a ceiling effect because some patients are just pretty good, so they cannot improve so many points. For moderately impaired patients, we can see we get 7.25 points Vogelmeier improvement. Patients are above 80% and 7.5 if they are below. So in this case, actually, it doesn't matter. We see very nice improvements for both. Of course, everybody had a classification accuracy above 62%, which is the significance threshold. And of course, for moderately impaired patients, you are seeing the biggest improvement because there's enough room to improve and they're just not so bad. So mostly spasticity is just not so bad. For severely impaired patients, this means they're coming very often with a hand like that, a lot of spasticity, no movements at all. Then you can see we get 6.75 points if they're above 80%. And only 1.25 points if they are below. And this very often goes hand in hand with problems with concentration, memory. It's difficult to stay alert and aware during the 45 minutes of treatment because the stroke affected them a lot, and for that reason it's difficult to do the treatment. Then we are reaching less. But for all the others, the improvement in Vogelmeier assessment is actually pretty nice. And here's an example of one of our recoveriX centers in Germany, in Lindau. So Stefan was treating the patient. This was a patient who came 6 months after his stroke into the recoveriX center. So all the public rehabilitation in the hospital and rehabilitation center was ended. And everybody told him, your hand will be like that for the rest of the life. And then he did 25 recoveriX sessions. And here in the video, you can see it on the left again before recoveriX and on the right-hand side after recoveriX. So removing the pegs is, of course, much easier than putting them in. But it's also very good to see, for example, tremor and how well the movement can be done. Now this is much more difficult to put them back. So patients are not allowed to use the healthy hand. This would be considered as cheating. And you can just easily see that this works much better. It's still difficult because it's such a difficult test. And these videos are also super important for patients because after 2 months of the treatment, so these 25 sessions are mostly done within about 2 months, they would forget how it was at the beginning. And these videos, you can very nicely visualize the improvements. And if I would just look at the Vogelmeier improvement of this patient, then I wouldn't actually be able to pinpoint the improvements so nicely because it's not so sensitive. You can see he's finished on the left. He had 1 peg, so a pretty high difference. Here's another person, subacute state, on the left-hand side before recoveriX, on the right-hand side after recoveriX. Same story again. So all the public rehabilitation and hospital treatment was completed. So he was released, and then the patient was on his own. He came into one of the recoveriX centers, in this case in Schiedlberg, where the treatment was done. And you can just see the hand movement is just much better. He's also doing less with the upper body, with the shoulders and so on. On the left, he's moving the upper body much more to lift the hand to the position. On the right-hand side, he's doing much more with the hand. Now he lost one peg, so he's also not cheating. He puts it back and then he sticks it in. Completed. And on the left, you can see he has 5 pegs done. Removing again. It's already very good. But we can still see that the patient had a stroke, so the hand function is not normal. And at this time, he didn't use both hands for gestures. So all the gestures were done with the right hand. You know, when he was talking, he moved only the right hand and the left one was not used. And here we have also an interview. Let me know if you hear the sound again. Oh, sorry, that's another example of the box and block test. So box and block test describes more gross motoric skills. You just have to lift these little blocks. And we are just counting the blocks. And on the left, you can see it beforehand. She could do 21 blocks. And on the right-hand side, she could do 39 blocks. So it's almost double. So these two tests are very objective. And the big question is, of course, there was no audio in the video, so no worries. What happens if somebody does it twice? Because all the patients who finish the recoveriX treatment here, of course, are super interested if they can still continue. And this video demonstrates it very nicely in a chronic patient. I think it's 3 years after the stroke. And she did 50 sessions. On top, you will see it before recoveriX. In the middle video, it's after 25 sessions. And on the bottom, it's after 50 sessions. So 2 complete therapy sessions that we are suggesting. I'm playing the video. You can see before recoveriX, it's really difficult to hold them. In the middle, it's already much better. Fingers are much more precise. And on the bottom, it's again 1 step better. So if you look at the absolute time, beforehand she needed 155 seconds, after 25 sessions 64 seconds, and after 50 sessions 52 seconds. So basically we see the improvements to continue. We did also a group study on that. This is basically what we see. So on the bottom she is already finishing. It's actually a very nice rapid hand movement. And if you look now back to the top video before recoveriX, you can just see the difference. So the index finger, for example, is not really able to hold the peg. She's more using the middle finger. This is completely different after 50 sessions. And here's another example, subacute state. It's actually 6 months after stroke, so some people consider this still as subacute, some people say it's already chronic. Same order on top before recoveriX, after all the public rehabilitation was completed, in the middle after 25 therapy sessions, and on the bottom after 50 sessions. And if you watch the video on the bottom, it's like healthy hand movement. So if I would observe this, I wouldn't notice anymore that this is a stroke patient. So for me, it doesn't look much different. And he's done after 50 recoveriX sessions, after 39 seconds. So this is roughly 9 seconds slower than healthy hand movement. So you need the 9-hole peg test to measure that, otherwise you would not see it. And in the middle, you can see time is 75 seconds. Hand movement is already much better than before recoveriX. But still he is using the upper body for doing it, which was not the case after 50 sessions. Then he removes it. It's pretty good, but it's a lot of upper body movement. Now we can watch carefully on the top video. Now the contrast is really big, how much more difficult it is. And when I'm speaking nowadays with the patient and he's using both hands for gestures, not only the right hand, he's using also the left hand. And when he's walking, he's swinging both hands like a healthy person. So there's no difference anymore between left and right hand when I observe him. And this is exactly what we want to achieve. So we did also a clinical study. So here's the result of upper extremity. We looked at the Ashworth scale. This is a measure for spasticity in the wrist. In the fingers, you can see we have a highly significant reduction of spasticity. P-value of 0.001 means basically that spasticity is reduced for everyone. So there's almost no exemption. And the Vogel-Meyer improvement for upper extremity is also highly significant. And this is also published in Frontiers in Neuroscience, where all the details are given precisely. And after this study, we thought, let's try it out for leg treatment, for locomotion and walking. And in this case, we are placing the electrodes on the paretic limb here on the lower foot. And we have bigger electrodes because we need more stimulation current. And we are treating it versus the contralateral healthy hand. So it's the same stimulator setup, the same computer, but in this case, we have a mirror in front of the patient. So the patient is seeing himself or herself as avatar in the mirror. And then you get the instruction to move the leg or the contralateral hand. So in this case, we have, of course, the functional electrical stimulation here on the lower limb. And then the patient can feel the leg movement. We also give visual feedback to activate the mirror neurons via the avatar, and we are measuring the EEG to control the avatar in the face, like before. So here you can see a little bit better where we place the electrodes to produce, in principle, a dorsiflexion of the foot. So it's the tibialis anterior, where we are fixing it. And here's an example of our recoveriX center in Schiedelberg. This is the therapist doing the treatment. This is the stroke patient. The recoveriX system. Here the therapist is having a look and the patient looks at the little avatar. So this is now a leg movement instruction. He imagines it, and then you can see that the foot moves a little bit because there's still a lot of spasticity. So the range of motion is still not normal because spasticity is actually blocking it. And this is done contralateral to the hand in order to activate both hemispheres in the patient. And this is ongoing for 240 movement imaginations, 120 left and 120 right. And this completes one therapy session. Also here we are doing in total 240 repetitions. And this sums up to 6,000 therapy sessions, like for the hand treatment. This means we are sending 6,000 times action potentials down the neurons, and healthy neurons are sniffing for connections and activity so they can detect electrical fields. And they're basically growing into the direction where we are sending it down 6,000 times. And this is the neuroplasticity that we are producing with recoveriX. So again, this is just demanding enough for a stroke patient who is pretty ill, and he can really purely focus on the movements he should do, and we are not irritating him with anything else to keep it sharp to the task he should do. Then we have also a patient interview.
Gehirnblutung habe ich gehabt, nicht? 2016 war das im November. Also ich war einseitig komplett gelähmt. Ich habe mich nicht reden können. Wir haben es dort tragen müssen und alles gemacht. Also das war das Schlimmste überhaupt, was der Mensch sich vorstellen kann. Dann, ja, die ersten Therapien, ja, es war sehr schwer für mich, vom Kopf her, weißt du, weil du musst ja das umsetzen. Und danach, dann hat es Mitte der Therapie, hat es auf einmal ist eine Blockade frei geworden. Und auf einmal, jetzt ist das frei und runter bis zu den Zehen und ich habe dann auf einmal die Zehen haben sich bewegt. Und das war ein Gefühl, das kann man sich nicht vorstellen, gell? Wenn auf einmal was frei wird und das bewegt sich wieder und du kannst das wieder bewegen, nicht? Am Anfang bin ich ja nur mit dem Stecken hingegangen und wieder raus. Und die letzten 10 Mal gehe ich eigentlich schon ohne Stock. Und das ist schon viel wert, nicht? Aber ein Ziel habe ich mir schon gesteckt. Ja, ich möchte wieder Radl fahren. Das bringt ja auch zusammen. Mit der Hilfe von da heraus. Ich bin so froh, muss ich sagen, dass ich das so entdeckt habe und dass ich es angenommen habe und gemacht habe.
This is also very interesting for him because suddenly, the tension, the spasticity in the hip was released and the toes moved again. And this is also what we see sometimes, there's no improvement and suddenly it makes click and the motor movements come back. Most of the time it's a continuous reduction of spasticity and a continuous improvement of skills, but sometimes it's just a sudden event. Here's another person, 84 years old, right side affected 2.5 years after the stroke. You can see the classification accuracy is around 70%. There was almost no information inside left and right hand movement imagination in the first session. At the end, there was a nice difference. There was also more ERD. Then we look at the Vogelmeier improvement of upper extremity and the lower extremity Vogelmeier assessment. And interestingly, we find always an improvement in both, but this is not a leg therapy, remember? So also in upper extremity, we find an improvement, which is really interesting. And in the lower extremity, we have here 2 pre-assessments with 14 and 16 points. So this is right before recoveriX is done. Then we are doing 25 sessions. You can see in the post-assessment, we have 21 points. So the maximum of the lower extremity Vogelmeier is 34 points. So it's much less than for upper extremities. But I like these measures much more because it's easier to understand how much a patient improved. So here you can see the 2 pre-assessments again. They are done within 1 month. Then we can see the patient needed 68 seconds or 70 seconds to walk 10 meters. So this is really slow. Then it got even worse, and with the recoveriX treatment, she ended finally at 54 seconds. We're also doing the timed up and go test. So in this case, you have to stand up, walk a circle, and you have to sit down again. And also here you can see there's a steady state before recoveriX. Then with every single treatment, it's getting faster and faster. At the end, it was 75 seconds. Of course, there are some slight fluctuations, but there's a nice trend. This is what we want to see. So here you can see the patient before recoveriX. So normally she's in a wheelchair and is also using a 4-point stick. Maybe I mute. It's anyhow in German. So you can see how difficult it is for her to walk at all. So these patients are really ill and severely impaired very often. And now after recoveriX, we can see it on the right-hand side. I also muted. She is coming to the recoveriX center with her husband. Now she is actually standing up without help. Our therapist was just there for safety reasons. And now you can actually see that she's walking much better. It's of course still slow, but still she's more confident. You can also see that the physiotherapist is not touching her anymore. On the left-hand side, Sarah was guiding her and helping her, which is not the case after recoveriX, just for safety reasons. She's still there. Another person, 60 years old, 4 years after the stroke, classification accuracy around 90%, very nice. We find also very nice differences, increased event-related desynchronization, so all showing more neuroplasticity. Then we can see here upper extremity improvement from 14 to 21 points. So that's actually a lot, but we were doing the lower limb treatment. Here you can see that also lower limb Vogelmeier improved. And the time up and go test is here. So before recoveriX 13 and 14 seconds, and with every single treatment, he got faster and faster. And at the end, he needed 11 seconds. A healthy person is not really much faster. 10-meter walking test. Also here you can see how the trend goes down. And at the end is 6 seconds. That's like a healthy person. Then we look also at modified Ashworth scale for spasticity, functional ambulatory categories, and muscle test. Manual muscle test. I skip this. I show you the videos.
Okay, also Sprunggelenk hoch und tief.
So here we are trying to move the foot up and down. This is after recoveriX.
Genau.
So you can see
Zehel hoch und tief.
the
Also vom
range of
Sprunggelenk
motion
hoch und tief.
is higher. And here
Genau, so nach
we
innen
are
und
asking for a sidewards movement,
Zehel nach
left
innen
and
und
right.
raus.
You get an idea. This is after recoveriX.
Genau so, ja, die Zehel so nach innen und außen.
Bigger
Und nur
range
die
of
Zehel.
motion, and this sums up
Nur die Zehel.
in better locomotion
Okay,
at
also
the end.
Sprunggelenk hoch und
And here's a much better video, before and after, next to each other. And in these videos, you can really see what's actually happening. So I play it. So on the left, he's already starting. Now he starts on the right. So you can see speed is much better. It's like a normal speed a healthy person is walking, and he reaches the end of the corridor at the same time. This is the improvement from 9 seconds to 6 seconds in 10-meter walking test. Here another patient on the left, again before recoveriX, on the right after recoveriX. I start at the beginning. So you can see on the right, she jumps up, walks much faster, has less tremor in the right hand, can do the circle much better, much more confident. Watch now when she sits down. It's like a healthy person on the left-hand side. Looks still like a patient. I play it again so that you can watch more careful. So she walks much faster. Very narrow circle, speeds back. Now watch again when she sits down, like a healthy person. And on the left, it's still like a patient. And if you just look at the image now, on the right, she looks like a healthy person. On the left, she still looks like a patient. And not sure if you have noticed the best thing. So on the right-hand side, after recoveriX, she has forgotten the walking stick. And this is exactly what we want to achieve. So patients should get so confident and so much better that they don't need the walking stick anymore. And this is actually a report that we are handing out to the patients. So she did, for example, 25 treatments. Mean classification accuracy was 96%, so perfect collaboration with recoveriX. Mocha test, 24 points before, 24 points afterwards. Ashworth scale for spasticity decreased from 3 points to 1.5. 0 would be no spasticity. Very nice reduction of spasticity. Vogelmeier in upper extremities increased from 43 to 54. But remember, we did the lower limb treatment, but upper limb movements got much better. So this is from moderately impaired to mildly impaired, much better. Vogelmeier for lower extremities improved from 25 to 27. So here it's only 2 points, but the lower extremity test is not very sensitive. That's the reason why it's good to have a timed up and go test. And here you can see she started with 26 seconds and now it's 16 seconds, 10 seconds better. This is really useful in daily life. And 10-meter walking test increased from 7.6 seconds to 6.4. So this is really quick. And also Patel index daily activities are much better. And as a remark, we have does not need the walking stick anymore. Speed is much better, and walking endurance improved a lot. Before she could do 300 meters, afterwards she could do 1000 meters. So this is more than 3 times more. Very nice improvement. So in the clinical study, we looked at many different tests, modified Ashworth scale for spasticity. We had video recordings. We had the timed up and go test, the 10-meter walking test, the Stroop color test for concentration performance, range of motion in the ankle, range of motion in the knee, and the Patel index. And here you can see the outcome. So spasticity in the ankle, highly significant improvement. The p-value is just not better because not everybody has spasticity in the group. So we had 22 patients in total. Time up and go test, highly significant improvement. 10-meter walking test, highly significant improvement. Stroop color word test, this is concentration performance, significant improvement. Same story as before, not everybody has problems with concentration, so there's nothing to improve. Range of motion, much better. Range of motion in the knee, much better. Not everybody has problems with range of motion in the knee. That explains the lower p-value. And Patel index also significant improvement. So all the parameters improved very nicely. But of course, the time up and go test and 10-meter walking test are the tests that we really want to improve. And if we compare that in the clinical investigation report with control studies, then we looked at 4,458 patients who were treated with other technology, for example, electromechanical training with end effectors. This is basically an exoskeleton or a locomotion training device, a robotic system. Then you can see e-gait with end effectors reaches a gait speed improvement of 0.11 meters per second. And with recoveriX, we reach 0.19 meters per second. So the improvement is much bigger than with any other technology that's used at the moment. So we looked at 25 patients. 10-meter walking test improved by 1 second on average, which is very nice. And this exceeds the substantial meaningful change. Gait speed improvement was 0.19 meters per second. And then we found also improvements in daily activities, spasticity, range of motion, time up and go test, cognitive assessment, and muscle function. And these are all very nice side effects, but the walking speed is, of course, our main measure. So the patients walk faster, and we don't need body weight support. We don't need an exoskeleton or any robotic device. This makes it much easier to use and also cheaper. And it's also safer because patients are seated, so they cannot fall down. And to put a patient into an exoskeleton or into a robotic device, you need often 2 or 3 therapists for doing it. In our case, the patient is just seated and you need 1 therapist. And even 1 therapist can take care of a couple of patients at the same times. So we can say recoveriX is effective and safe. And that's also the reason why it's a medical product in many countries around the world already. And there is also there are some guidelines from the Stroke Rehabilitation Association in the US and also in Canada. And they have a list of different trainings or therapies that you should actually do with stroke patients. So here you can see that task-specific training is, for example, recommended. And here you can see classes 1, 2A, and 2P. 1 means the treatment should be done. 2A means it's reasonable. 2B means it may be done. and 3 would mean there's no benefit. So this is the list, or the table is coming from many publications and clinical studies that are done. And the level of evidence, A means multiple publications or populations were investigated. B means there's only a limited population evaluated, and C means it's very limited. And if you look at recoveriX, then we are doing task-specific training. They have to do a certain movement. We have constraint-induced movement therapy because we're working with both sides. So you're just allowed to use one to do the task. We have mental practice because recoveriX patients have to imagine left and right hand movement. We don't have strengthening exercise because we don't put weights onto the patients, but they can do it at home, so they don't need us for doing it. We have bilateral training, so we do always left versus right hand side. We have virtual reality, so there's the avatar in front of the patients. We don't do robotics for the simple fact that robotics is expensive, not maintenance free, and dedicated to a certain limb. So it can be a hand, it can be leg movement. With FES, we are completely flexible. It's upper limb and lower limb treatment. We have functional electrical stimulation. So most of these therapies and recommendations are embedded in recoveriX. What we don't have is acupuncture, but you can see it's anyhow not really recommended. So it's very limited and no benefit. Sorry, 3 means there's no benefit. So there's no need for having acupuncture for us. And if you look at in Canada, then they say you should do mirror neuron therapy. So this is in the subacute state, this is in the chronic state. And A is evidence comes from a meta-analysis. B would means evidence comes from a single or 2 sources. And C means there's very limited evidence. So mirror neuron therapy is recommended. We have it. Mental practice is recommended. We have it. Constraint-induced movement therapy is inside because we're doing both. Strength training is something that we suggest to do at home, and many patients are anyhow doing physiotherapy and occupational therapy. Beside, bilateral arm training is included. Training of active movements is included, and functional dynamic training is something that people can also do at home. Then we have range of motion exercises. Virtual reality training is included. FES is included. DDCS acupuncture is not included, but we have biofeedback, and we are not doing transcranial magnetic stimulation because this is a treatment done in hospitals, and we are also not doing the DDCS, but it has anyhow only a B. So to summarize, we are doing a lot of things which are recommended in the USA and Canada at the same time with one single treatment, and otherwise, you know, a patient has to do everything individually, which takes much more time and is of course also costing much more money. And then we looked also into a group study where we treated patients beforehand with the upper limb therapy and afterwards with the lower limb therapy. I just show you one example. There's also a nice paper that Sebastian published recently. So this was a male subject, left side affected, 5 years after the stroke, and the lesion was in the cortex and subcortex. It is also interesting that recoveriX actually works for cortical and subcortical lesions, which was also not proven before. So here you can see the timeline. We did a pre-assessment, then the recoveriX hand therapy was done, did a post-assessment. A couple of months later, we did another pre-assessment. The leg therapy was done. We did a post-assessment. A couple of months later, we did another post-assessment and the pre-assessment. The third therapy was done, and then we did a post-assessment again. So in total, 75 recoveriX sessions. Here's classification accuracy over these 25 therapies. Upper extremity, you can see it's on average around 80%. Lower limb therapy is a little bit better by about 15% of the first and the second leg therapy. And here you can see the improvements in Vogel-Meyer assessment upper extremity. Remember, only the first recoveriX session or block was for upper limb, so we can see a very nice improvement in Vogel-Meyer around 10 points. And then we did the leg therapy. Upper limb functions were improving again. And at the end, we had an increase of around 10 points from the beginning until the end. Time was about 1 year. This is for lower extremities. You can see even during the hand therapy, lower limbs improved. Then it improved again. And then it improved again. So altogether, we have around 4 points. And if we look at the time up and go test during the leg therapies, you can see the trend, how it's going down. At the end, we are 24% faster. 10-meter walking test, you can also see how it went down, and the patient was faster at the end after all the therapy blocks, in this case 26% reduction. And this shows if you're doing recoveriX again, you are continuing to get better. And this is exactly what we want, because very often patients after a treatment is terminated, they just get worse. This is what we don't have with recoveriX treatment, because at the end, when you're finished, your brain is healthier. So healthy neurons take over the function. And that's the reason why we have a long-lasting effect. And we started also a recoveriX franchise system so that people can also offer recoveriX treatment in different countries and cities. And here we recommend basically that you have an entrance area so the patients can wait, and then you have a couple of treatment rooms where people can enter with a wheelchair or themselves. And then we have recoveriX systems here, and the therapist can take care of them. And of course, you need also a reception and some restrooms, and then you can already go ahead. This is the upper extremity therapy report that people are getting. So in this case, John Doe did 25 sessions, mean accuracy was 85%. Montreal Cognitive Assessment improved. This is what we see very often. Ashworth scale didn't improve because it was at 0, so the patient didn't have any spasticity. Vogel-Meyer improvement for upper extremities 5 point, Vogel-Meyer improvement for lower extremities, box and block test improvement, 9-hole peg test improvement, and Patel test. And this is what we hand out to patients so that they have a very objective proof of the therapy results. And here you can see a map where recoveriX centers are located at the moment. So we are in Japan, in South Korea, in China, we are also in Australia, just a point is missing, in South Africa, in Nigeria, many nations in Europe, also in Canada, USA, also in South America. So it's spreading out. And then our neurologist asked the question, why didn't you use it for multiple sclerosis? So we thought, let's give it a try. So if we look at MS, then it's a neurological disease of the CNS, central nervous system. And the myelin is actually the problem. So on the top, you see a normal nerve. And because of MS, the nerves are affected. And the insulation of the nerve is actually decaying. And then you get an exposed fiber. The action potentials cannot travel down the neuron anymore. So if we look at this animation, then you can see on the right the healthy neuron. And you can see how the action potential travels down very fast because of the myelin. And on the left-hand side, you can see that the action potential doesn't reach the end of the nerve anymore, and that's producing the problems for motor functions, but also for other things like muscle weakness. The posture is a problem. They cannot really stand. They have problems with balance. They fall very often. They have a freezing of the feet on the floor and cannot move forward. Walking duration is a big problem. And fatigue is also a very big problem. So they can be active for a couple of minutes and then they have to sleep again. And this results, of course, in a low quality of life. And in the past, exercises were not really recommended because people thought it makes it even worse. In the meantime, different trainings are suggested, like aerobic training, yoga, and so on. And our treatment goal was to increase gait endurance, so they should walk longer, to increase walking speed, to produce less spasticity, improve balance, which also leads to better physical activity. And we also wanted to improve quality of life and fatigue. And stroke, for example, is always unilateral. So it's always the left or the right-hand side, or at least I never met a stroke patient where both sides were affected. For MS, it's a little bit different because it's affecting both sides of the body. This means both hands, both upper limbs and both lower limbs. And for that reason, we needed a treatment protocol which can actually treat all 4 limbs. And this is how we solve it. So we do one leg versus the contralateral hand in one training session, looks like that. So this is done in order to activate both hemispheres. And in the next training session, we do exactly the opposite. So the other foot
left
versus the other contralateral hand.
relax,
And with this protocol, we can actually treat all 4
Right.
limbs. And for multiple sclerosis, we are doing 30 training sessions, a little bit more. So we do, again, 2 pre-assessments to have a certain status. Then they get 30 training sessions. Then we do the post-assessment again. So we have, again, the modified Ashworth scale for spasticity, video recordings to have a nice proof, timed up and go test for standing up, sitting down, walking, 25 foot walking test. So they have to do 25 steps. And 6 minutes walking test. So we are measuring the distance, how far they can travel. And then we have also the multiple sclerosis impact scale. It's looking at daily living activities and performance. And we have a modified fatigue scale, which looks at physical tiredness and lack of energy. And here you can see as an example the multiple sclerosis impact scale. First question is, for example, 2 physical demanding tasks, and then you can say not at all, a little, moderately, quite a bit, extremely. So they have to circle it, and it sums up to a couple of points. So it goes from 24 to 145 points. So lower, yeah. And this is the modified fatigue scale, where we ask, for example, I have been less alert, and then you can say never, or almost often I have had difficulty paying attention for long periods of time. I've been unable to think clearly, and so on. And this sums also up to 84 points. And this is already an outcome of a multiple sclerosis patient who had it for a couple of years. And you already know the story. On the left, it's before recoveriX. On the right, it's after recoveriX. So you can just see the walking speed is much better. He's stepping wider, but also much faster. On the left-hand side, you can see how much slower this looks like. So this is 25 seconds before recoveriX and 15 seconds after recoveriX. Very nice improvement. If you look at the 6 minutes walking test, so the patient could do around 80 meters before recoveriX. So you see it's very stable. And then we see a nice trend. So the maximum was 155 meters, which is about double distance after the recoveriX training. And interesting for him is that he was saying he thought at the beginning this is completely useless. He is just wasting his time. And in session 7 or 8, suddenly his spasticity in the left leg was reduced and he could move his leg again. And then he traveled much longer and he could walk much wider. So the patient reported also that he can stand up straight again. His concentration improved. Standing up and sitting down improved because he has better stability and balance. And in the first recoveriX sessions, his wife was bringing him to the therapy. And after a few therapies, he could travel by car himself again. This is, of course, also very important for independence. And now he's very happy that he can lift his left foot again. This makes also a huge difference when you're sleeping, for example. He can turn himself around and he doesn't need the wife were doing it. So his sleep improved a lot because he can move around. You can see it's 26 years living with multiple sclerosis. So still there's improvement possible. Normally, doctors are just talking about medication to stop the decline, but nobody is talking about making patients better again. And this is exactly what we are doing here. Here's another patient, 24 years after MS onset, a little bit younger, 47. And on the left, you can see ankle inversion and exversion. You can see the range of motion and the speed improved nicely. So up, down is better, left, right is better. The socks look also nicer. And this is the video after the therapy and before. And here on the right, you can see the walking speed is much better. And on the left, you can see something which is very systematic and symptomatic. So they are freezing on the floor and they need a moment to continue. I play it maybe again so that you can pay attention. So she's freezing for a moment with after every single step and needs a moment to continue. This is completely gone on the right. So one step after the other. Beforehand, she needed 40 seconds. Afterwards, she can do it in 19, more than double speed. And if you look at endurance, beforehand, she could do around 35 meters, and then you can see the trend getting longer, longer, longer. And at the end, she could do 3 times more, 101 meters. This makes a huge difference in daily life, because suddenly you can go to the supermarket again, you can go to your car, you can go into the garden, and this is just super important. So she was saying at the beginning, she came to the therapy with a wheelchair, and she could walk only about 20 meters. And she needed short breaks or a pause after each step. This is what we have seen in the video. Now, after the therapy, she is walking with a stick. She goes outside more often, is more joyful, more zest for life, a lot less sleepy, is able to lift off her foot better, while standing the foot sticks a lot better to the ground. She liked it here in the gym, super cool. Coordination improved. Concentration and memory was always good. 6 minutes walking test, performance doubled, actually more. She switched out her 3-point stick with a Lakey. So this is just a normal walking stick. And also for this reason, she looks much more healthy. And she said also the strength in her hand improved. So very nice results. So to summarize the clinical study, we looked at the Ashworth scale for spasticity. We had the video recordings, time up and go test, time 25 foot walking test, 6 minutes walking test, multiple sclerosis impact scale and fatigue scale. And here you can see the standing up, walking a circle and sitting down improved a lot, very significant. 6 minute walking test, endurance improved nicely. Multiple sclerosis impact scale improved a lot. So patients are feeling MS much less. Fatigue improved. This is outstanding because there's just no other treatment against fatigue available. And with recoveriX, we get it more or less as a side effect. 25 foot walking test improved nicely. And spasticity was reduced. The only reason why it's not so significant is, again, that not everybody has spasticity. So we developed also a franchise concept so that people can actually offer recoveriX treatment in different countries. And I already explained what you need to run recoveriX yourself. We always suggest to have a couple of recoveriX systems in one location because one therapist can take care of a couple of patients at the same time. And we are also suggesting different regions to be taken over by a franchisee. So this is an example in Spain. Here's, for example, Catalonia. And then we have a certain population in Galicia, for example, of 4 million people. So you would need about 15 recoveriX systems for taking care of the whole region. So this is the initial investment for getting all the recoveriX technology. This is the yearly turnover that you can achieve under full load. Of course, you can do about 90 patients per recoveriX system. This is calculated if all the recoveriX systems are running under full load. Of course, people have to be aware and you have to get them first to build it up. This is something that they are doing very nicely in Slovenia. So last years, they did already 2,500 treatments just in Slovenia. You can see they have locations in Maribor, which is pretty close to Austria, and in Kranj. It's here and in Toprina, difficult to pronounce for me. Slovenia has about 2 million people. So at the end, we want to have 5 recoveriX systems so that nobody has to travel longer than 30 minutes to get the treatment. And here you can see an a team with many different expertises. So Andras, for example, is a medical doctor who can very nicely explain the neuroplasticity and all the effects to patients. And he also goes to conferences to report about scientific results. And Renée, for example, is a physiotherapist, so she's really doing the assessments and the treatments. And these different disciplines are working together to make recoveriX successful in Slovenia. And for 25 therapies, they're charging, for example, 1,850 euros in Slovenia. So this breaks down to around 70 euros per treatment. This is comparable to a standard physiotherapy. You can also see media likes it. So they are in many TV channels and radios where they are reporting about recoveriX, which is very nice. For example, Maribor 24. And they have also contracts already with different insurance companies like Merkur or Sava. Sava is, for example, one of the biggest in Slovenia, and they are already co-financing the recoveriX treatment. This is also something that we already have in Austria. So the Austrian social security system is already co-financing the treatment for all their patients. And here you can see the Austrian border. So here's Germany, Czech Republic, Hungary, Slovenia and Italy. And we have a couple of systems in Vienna, also in Linz. Schiedlberg is where I'm sitting. Then here is Weidhofen, Schladming. That's a famous skiing resort. Innsbruck is also a famous skiing resort. And in Klagenfurt in the south and in Graz, where University of Technology is located. So people can already pretty easily get the recoveriX system treatment in Austria. If you look at Germany, then we have, for example, in Freiburg, where Stefan is doing the recoveriX treatment. We have 2 locations in Munich. We are in Passau, in Chemnitz, very soon, likely in Dresden. We are also in Frankfurt, and very soon Hamburg, and further towns are opening in Germany. In Finland, for example, it's in Helsinki, in Tampere, and so on. So Finland is one of the countries where recoveriX started first. So Finnish people are very open to new technology. This is not the same in every country, but Finnish people are very good in that. And they showed, for example, very nicely that recoveriX works very nicely for chronic pain. So if somebody has problems with medication and chronic pain, these patients are already transferred to one of the recoveriX centers. If you look at the whole world, then you can see in Europe, we are already in Austria, of course, in Germany, in Slovenia, in Spain, the Netherlands, in Portugal, in Israel, Finland, and Switzerland. And in a few weeks, Italy is opening and many other countries are following. In Africa, we are already in Nigeria and also South Africa. That's missing at the moment here. And in Asia, we are already in Hong Kong. So we work together with a franchisee who wants to open 15 recoveriX centers at the end in Hong Kong, so that every patient can get easily a treatment. In Thailand, we are already in Bangkok. So also our franchisee wants to open many locations just in Bangkok because there are so many people. The same in South Korea and Australia. So we have partnerships with therapists who want to take care of the whole country. And in the United States, we are, for example, already in New York, in Albany, and in Washington State, and also in Canada and in Mexico. And now it's also spreading into South America. And this is an example of the recoveriX center in Bangkok. Patient waiting area. And you can see it's just very nicely designed so that people also like to be there and get the treatment. And you can get much more information about recoveriX, of course, on recoveriX.com or at recoveriX.at. We have also a lot of patient videos and patient results available on the website. And you can also find many, many videos on YouTube. So these pre-post videos are very often published. Then it's very easy for a patient to understand which improvement the patient can expect. And with this slide, I would actually like to end my presentation. And I look quickly into the Q&A. Reza is asking, is there any correlation between improvement rate and the gender of the patient in upper and lower extremity? No. So we didn't find any difference in gender-wise. So it works for female and male patients equally. Were there any evaluations to investigate the improvement rate for the lower extremity compared to the upper extremity for different patients? We looked, of course, at the improvements of upper and lower extremities, and for each one we have a nice paper. And in the scientific section of the web page, you can also find these papers. They're all open source. Then you see it very much in detail what improved. Julian is asking, from a regulatory standpoint, do you found it much more cumbersome to start electrical stimulations? Are the regulations constraints homogeneous with the European Union space? In the European Union, the regulations are exactly the same for all the countries. So nowadays you have to be under the medical MDR directive, and then you can actually with one approval sell in the whole European Union. And then you get again different regulations for Australia, New Zealand, Canada, USA, of course, Japan, China, and you have to follow all of them to be allowed to do it. Functional electrical stimulation is a standard treatment. Of course, it must be super safe because we are injecting electrical current, and it must be built accordingly. Nadine is asking, do you think it's helpful for patients with chronic fatigue syndrome? I think so, because we just see very dramatic improvements for fatigue. Not only for MS, also for others. So we had, for example, a language therapist from Vienna who could treat one child before recoveriX, and then she had to go to sleep because she was super tired. After recoveriX, she could do 6 treatments, and afterwards she was going shopping. So a very nice improvement in fatigue. Nadine is also asking if the German health insurance also co-finances the treatment. Not so far as I know. It's of course different for private health insurances, but I guess it will also come pretty soon. How is the insurance system for recoveriX? Dr. Kamada is asking. Hello, greetings to Japan. So in Austria, they are getting 59 point something euros per treatment back. So for 25 therapy sessions, this is around 1,000 euros. And the remaining amount can be deducted from the tax report. So at the end, it's not so much costing anymore for the patient, which is of course very nice. Or do you have any tips to establish the recoveriX room? We were also super worried many years ago that insurance compensation is super important. Nowadays, we know it's not important, because patients are just happy to pay out of pocket. They just want to have an option to get better again. Somebody's asking, how can I get this treatment in India? So we have already recoveriX centers in India. They are just appearing. So one system is already active, but the second system is already now installed. So please just send us an email and we can send you the locations of these recoveriX centers in India. Then you can get the treatment right away. Dusan is asking, was concentration and cognitive ability improved upon improvement of motor abilities? Yes. So we found very nice improvements in concentration performance and also in Mocker scale, in Stroop test, in memory functions. So it's a very nice side effect of the recoveriX treatment, and it has also to do with better mobility. So people are moving more, and this, of course, has also a positive effect on all the other. And then Alexandru is asking, saying, thank you for the presentation. Are you aware of any issues for recoveriX in terms of BCI illiteracy? Personally, I think BCI illiteracy doesn't exist. So whenever we train a patient or a student, we get it working. So you just have to do it seriously enough. So in my opinion, people who don't get it to work are just lazy or they're not interested to get it working. So for all the systems that we do, P300, SSV, CWEB, motor imagery at the end, they work. You just have to motivate people enough. So we don't work at all on BCI illiteracy because it doesn't exist. And with that, I stop my presentation because I can see that George is already here. George, I promote you to the panelist. Please come online. I can see you, so I make you also a co-host. Hello to Praga. George, can you hear me? Hello, nice to hear you. You're a little bit silent, but I can hear you.
Let me check if I can improve the sound.
I can also see you. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, but can you hear me well?
No, it's good, yes.
Yep. Okay.
So how are you? All good?
Yes. The fact that you are also doing fine. First of all, congratulations on the successful edition of the Spin School. It's always a pleasure to be here.
George, do you maybe have headphones with you because it's still difficult to understand you?
Yeah, well, let me check if I can correct it.
Okay, take your time. I answer another question that I can see in the Q&A in the meantime, and you get some time for improving the audio. Is this kind of rehabilitation helping only those who have had some brain injury like stroke, or also those who had injured hand, finger cut and operated it back again? So we had also patients with after neurosurgery, for example, where recoveriX helped. And recently we had also patients with spinal cord injury where recoveriX helped them to improve a lot. Our clinical study is just not finished, but in this case, the lesion was in the spinal cord and not in the cortex or in the brain. And we found also nice improvements for that. So next year, you will hear more about spinal cord injury. I think George is getting another headphone. Any other questions in the meantime? Anna is asking if recoveriX is available in Warsaw in Poland. Not yet, but we have a physiotherapist who is working with recoveriX here in Austria, and she has actually plan of bringing recoveriX to Warsaw pretty soon. But of course, the franchise system is open to everybody, so just drop us an email if you would be interested in bringing recoveriX into your city. Then we can develop a plan together. Of course, we want to make it available quickly to many patients because they are just improving nicely. And if we have more recoveriX centers, then it's also good for everybody because awareness is increased, and then people can just pick the next center which is available to them. Then somebody is asking, are there any rehabilitation centers in Colombia, South America? Yes, g.tec has one sitting in Cali in Colombia, so patients can also go there to get the recoveriX training in Cali, Colombia. And we're also speaking with people at the moment from Brazil and Argentina to open centers, but it's just happening now. So it's very new to South. It's actually the last, or it was the last continent. So our center opened in January this year. What are the current plans for France? So we have interested people in Paris and in Montpellier, but just get in contact with us. So it's also super important to come to France, of course. And David is asking, is there still time? Thanks for mentioning the franchise model. Could you tell a little bit more about the recoveriX for distribution in public entities or for non-profit organizations? So actually we have two models. Hospitals and rehabilitation centers can just buy recoveriX, so they don't need a franchise models because they have patients anyhow. And for all the others, so for the ambulatory treatment, we offer the franchise model. So to open these centers together and to treat many patients on a daily basis. This has the big advantage for patients that don't have to stay overnight. They can just go there for a quick treatment and then they can return to their families. And otherwise they have to stay maybe for a month in the rehabilitation center. Dr. Kamada is asking, how long time can we provide recoveriX? We have time limitation in Japanese insurance. So one treatment is 45 minutes long. This fits actually into most social security plans around the world. And I wouldn't reduce it because it takes some time for the patients to come to the institute. And so it should be worth their time. So I would more double it than reduce it to make it more effective for patients.